Welcome to this, the very first edition of the Fiction Factor. Over the next few weeks, I will be aiming to review books, television programmes, films, even radio shows, and I would like to invite you, the viewers, to upload your choice of fiction, whether it be fan fiction for a television programme or fiction of your own. It will not be plagiarised, it will not be stolen. Feel free to submit to the email address below, which is inquiries.alphatv36@yahoo.com. Please include a short, very brief, no more than a couple of lines or so, description of your story and a name, whether it be your name or a username. And your story will be within a chance to be read out on air each week. I will apologise in advance if there is a large number and we cannot always read your programme out this series. I am hoping, depending on reaction, to send series back. If, however, you are unsuccessful in your story being read out, we will, of course, email you back regardless. And all stories will be read and vetted, whether shown on this programme or checked by our staff, namely me, as I seem to be the only one at this station. At the moment, we are in the throes of the early days of transmission, so I apologise for the poor quality as we are recording via a laptop computer. I hope in the future to upgrade this picture quality and even the sound quality. So I do apologise if this sound quality isn't the best. Please, please, please give feedback and I will do my best to rectify it for future broadcasts. Currently, I have here a couple of books which are in line to be reviewed. I'm currently in the process of reading Havana Storm by Clive Cussler, which is one of the Dirk Pitt novels. So far, even though only being 9 chapters in, it's certainly something I'd recommend wholeheartedly to anybody that likes adventure novels, fantasy, etc. One of his most famous ones is perhaps Raise the Titanic, which was made into a film by Lew Grade back in the early 80s, prior to the discovery of the real-life wreck of the Titanic. The film received mixed reviews, but from what I gather, the book is rather an interesting read, and I would encourage anybody, if they are currently reading it, feel free to contact me to let me know what their opinion is of the film. Also, this being one of the more recent releases is what I'm unsure of whether it is a debut novel, however, it doesn't appear to be. It's new this year, it's by Belinda Bauer and it's called Snap, and the tagline reads, "One quick decision could be her last." The reviews from the Sunday Mirror are dazzlingly good and keeps you guessing from the Sunday Times. It has also got reviews from Woman in Home, the Daily Telegraph, and Claire Mackintosh. Points in the series, I do hope that we will be able to inform you of our opinions of these two books. Also, television programmes that are currently being viewed ready for review by this programme are the Australian Broadcasting Company's Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries, based on the Phryne Fisher Murder Mystery series of books by Kerry Greenwood, starring Essie Davis as the titular character. Also in line for review is Netflix Originals Grace and Frankie, starring none other than Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. So far, both series appear to be very good, and we are quite enjoying the progress of them so far. If you've got any programmes or any ideas that you wish to be reviewed, please send them again to that email address, inquiries.alphatv36@yahoo.com. Coming up later tonight, I hope to inform you of various other books that are hidden away from this set. I would like to remind you of this opportunity that this programme is completely improvised and there is no script apart from about 4 lines, which I've already read at the very beginning. I hope that these programmes will be half-hourly per week. I also hope that you find them informative, educational, and on occasion I will try to make them fun. If there is anything you do or don't like, please feel free to inform myself via the email address, which I can always read out to you again, but it should be displayed on the bottom of the screen here and in the description below this broadcast. Obviously, with regards to news of any sort that you'd like to be informed on this programme, please send it to the same email address, as it will be discussed, reported on, etc., on our news programme, Alpha News. I'm not quite sure how this is going to be perceived as a channel and a programme, as it's perhaps probably out of place. Please excuse that. That's my phone, which should have been put on silent. However, I would also like to review cookbooks, lifestyle books, various things. If you have anything at all that you feel has got the fiction factor, please feel free to contact us with the information shown on the screen again below. I'd like to go through some books that have previously been read. Now, we will try and encompass, in regards to fiction, very wide varieties and a very broad range of different genres of fiction. For example, romance, crime, thrillers, horror, even sagas. Now, I do have one not quite to hand, but I have some various sagas and things that have been read by myself and thoroughly enjoyed, and I would like to share them with you. Not all books may be to your taste, but I'll try and encompass various different age range of books, books that may appeal to, say, the older person, the maturer person, the elderly perhaps, or even teenage fiction if I can. I know that books with a younger generation, my generation and below, sometimes even generations above myself, don't necessarily have the time to read or the inclination to read, and I will not hold that against you in any way, but feel free to listen to our reviews and watch all the same. Likewise, we will try to review various recent discoveries on soap operas, namely the ITV broadcasts Coronation Street, courtesy of Granada, and Emmerdale, courtesy of Yorkshire Television. I will endeavour to do as much as I can to make this as an informative programme as possible, and I look forward to your continued viewership in the future. Now let's proceed with the programme and begin with the first few books that we wish to review. Thank you for staying with us. Now, the first book that I wish to review dates back to the early 50s, 1954 to be exact. It's Desire of the Heart, written by Barbara Cartland. It, as I said, is over 60 years old. It's typical of her sort of novel. It's a classic traditional romance novel set with Victorian aristocratic men admiring from afar pure, refined virgin ladies. Now, I first read this book only a few years ago now. I was quite intrigued about, I'd known about the Barbara Cartland, but I was quite intrigued by the sheer fact that I'd seen her at this point in a classic interview clip from Terry Wogan. Now, this interview showed her with another author, well known at the time, but for different reasons, Jackie Collins, and the subsequent discussion, shall we say, over both of their writing styles. Now, during this interview, Barbara Cartland made it clear, actually, of her distaste and displeasure at the permissive society, she called it. She kept on saying throughout this interview that we've got to get back to the family. This interview is available to see on YouTube. I cannot quite remember the name of the channel that it's on. However, I'm sure that you will find it interesting if you're finding this review rather interesting. Now, this was from back in the 80s, around 1987, and she describes her books to be pure, clean, about love, and constantly refers to it being family material appropriate for all the family. The opinion that I got from watching this interview and from actually reading portions of Desire of the Heart, which I found to be a very old-fashioned book, to be quite honest, I found myself falling asleep whilst
whilst reading it. It's not something I'd recommend wholeheartedly, in my opinion. I found it quite boring and quite staid and cliched and old-fashioned. Boy meets girl, problems happen, stop them being together, they get together and get married formula. But I'd say even in the 50s, perhaps sort of in keeping, but starting to sort of be on its last legs. And she was still writing books like that well into the 90s. So clearly she had an audience that quite enjoyed reading these. But now I felt that this made her very much a product of her generation. She was, in my opinion, at this point, very out of touch with how society was going. And she clearly was quite happy not moving with the times. I got about 4 chapters in and felt I couldn't read any more, and unfortunately discarded the book and haven't touched it or been inclined to buy or read any more of her books since. Obviously, I do apologise if I offend anybody in this, but these programmes will encompass my opinions, and I'm happy to, in subsequent shows, give the opinions of anybody who wishes to appropriate an appropriate argument. However, personally, I wouldn't recommend her books because I think, quite frankly, they are very old-fashioned and very slow. The next book that I'd like to discuss with you is written by quite a famous authoress with an equally famous sister. She has sadly passed away now, passing away from cancer a few years ago. She wrote over 30 novels, 2 of which were made into successful film, 3 of which, were made into successful films, plus 2 or 3 more which were made into very successful miniseries. Now, the lady in question is the dear departed Jackie Collins, who quite rightly was known not as the Queen of Romance, but known for the sort of novels that, let's say, were quite racy. The book that I wanted to discuss in this particular segment and episode is The World is Full of Married Men, which was first published by W.H. Allen in 1968. It was it's her debut novel, and Barbara Cartland, in her infinite wisdom, I suppose, described it to be a nasty, horrible book, and she followed this up by accusing Collins of creating every pervert in Britain. Several countries actually banned the book due to the graphic nature, and this only served to boost sales in the United Kingdom and in Australia. I mean, let's face it, if a book is, or a television series or film is reviewed and the review says it's rather nasty or graphic or shocking or not for the faint-hearted, you're going to see it or read it if it's a book. It's just natural human curiosity. You want to know what all the fuss is about. The basic premise of it is about a media mogul, David Cooper, who repeatedly cheats on his wife and neglects her for various young, impressionable starlets in the British advertising industry. It shows the cutthroat world of the media business. Eventually, his wife wises up, she throws him out and goes off, marries a wealthy American. As her life goes up, his goes down, sort of like a positive and negative balancing the world out. He ends up being able to only perform for his dowdy-mousy secretary, Miss Fields, who by the end of the book becomes pregnant by him, essentially showing you that karma does bite you eventually. It's possibly quite tame by today's standards, 50 years later. However, all of her books are still in print, are still regularly being sold, so she's clearly kept pace with everything, if not ahead of her time. It's definitely a book I'd recommend. It's quite a short book, it's just over 200 and something pages. Most bookshops sell it, most supermarkets will sell it, I would imagine, as I purchase the copies that I have from supermarkets and charity shops. I will come to review more of her books as this series progresses, and I would encourage each and every one of you to read them, obviously over a certain age, as it can be quite shocking. Now, I read this book on a couple of occasions, and each time understood what the book was about. Found it no less exciting to read the second time around, although I have read much more recent works of hers in the interim, and so would possibly date it now. But at the same token, I would still fully recommend it as a book, which is really worthwhile. That brings us to the end of this first part. I hope you'll return to us after the break. See you then. Welcome back to the Fiction Factor. Now, earlier on, before the break, I was reviewing The World is Full of Married Men by Jackie Collins, and I neglected to add that the book was made into quite a successful film back in around 1979-1980. It was the third film that had been derived from a novel of Collins's, the first one being The Stud. It was made into a film in 1978. The Bitch in 1979, and then, of course, The World is Full of Married Men. I forgot to mention that all her books, as well as being available everywhere else, are also available on Amazon and second-hand copies on eBay. With regard to Barbara Cartland's books, I know a great deal of them have been re-released as the Eternal Collection, and a series of books that she wrote that were unpublished at the time she passed away have been released as the Pink Collection, both in paperback and in Kindle editions. Unfortunately, some cases, I don't think all of the books are in print still. Anyway, now we're back. We have one final book to review before we go across to our section where we will review television programmes. Okay, so the final book that I wanted to review is called Above Suspicion. It's written by Lynda La Plante, who is perhaps known for Widows, which was made by Thames Television for ITV and debuted as a miniseries back in 1983, with sequels following in both 1985 and 1995, respectively. Alongside this is Prime Suspect, which is possibly one of the best-known works of her time, which went on to become a successful series of novels and a successful programme for ITV. In the case of Above Suspicion, which is the series which has been adapted into a television series for ITV, as well as a successful series of books chronicling the story of Detective Inspector Anna Travis. They chronicle both her professional and personal lives and her relationship with her DCI. Now, I would be inclined to recommend this to you. However, you would need to be a dedicated reader, as the chapters to this book, while there is such a small amount, are extremely long. I think the shortest chapters were possibly between 18 and 20 pages, possibly more. So it will feel like a never-ending story. But if you like deep woven plots and crime thrillers and fast-paced stories, then these are possibly books for you. To me, the length of the chapters is the only drawback, so feel free to try them, to give them a whirl. There is, I'm sure, second-hand copies available on eBay as well as brand new. Bookshops like Waterstones, W.H. Smith's, Amazon, in physical copy editions, say paperback, possibly even hardback still, and of course the Kindle editions. I'm aware that Widows has been re-released and is allegedly due to become a major film, which I'm sure we will be covering at some point in either this first series of The Fiction Factor or a later series. Okay, now in this fiction and TV section, we will of course, be reviewing various television programmes, which ranges from programmes shown on the various TV channels as well as on platforms such as Netflix. Now, the programme I want to discuss with you now is called Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. It is based on the Phryne Fisher Murder Mystery series written by Australian author Kerry Greenwood, and first premiered on ABC One in Australia in 2012 before finishing about 3 years ago. And there were 3 series, 2 of a series of 13 episodes and 1 of around 9 episodes, I believe. This series is set in Melbourne, Australia in the late 1920s and follows the exploits of Phryne as at the request of various wealthy pillars of the community, or by sheer curiosity helps and both hinders Detective Inspector Jack Robinson of the City South Police Force, alongside her butler, Mr. Butler, her cabby friends Cess and Bert, her maid Doc Williams, and senior constable Hugh Collins, who eventually becomes Doc's husband. It's a classic detective series. They solve a variety of crimes with Jack Robinson. Eventually they get together. It's a classic sort of detective series in a way, is Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries, chiefly because if you see elements of Agatha Christie in there, you can see elements of Remington Steele in there with the sort of work. You can see the connection, but it takes them a long time to finally acknowledge it, and at the end of the series they do. A running subplot is Phryne's companion and housemaid Doc Williams and her blossoming love affair with the police constable Hugh Collins, which eventually culminates in marriage at the end of the series, and they go off on a honeymoon. It's quite tongue-in-cheek at times, light-hearted also, quite modern in some ways, quite risque in some ways, but nevertheless, it's a very popular series, it's a very good series, and I had nothing but good things about it, and would wholeheartedly recommend it. But again, you have to like crime programmes. If you don't, I still think you'd enjoy it. I think you'd find it funny. It's just finding the time to sit down and do it, but it's well worth the time. Go spend that time wisely and watch Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. I implore you to. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for in this first edition of The Fiction Factor, but I'd like to thank those of you that have taken the time to tune in and watch. I hope that you found it informative. Again, feel free to send through any books that you'd like to be reviewed, or television series, even films. If we've got the time, we'll fit them in. Also, that includes fan fiction clips or fan fiction stories, if you wish for them to be read out on air, or your own original stories that you wish to be read out on air. Please send them through to inquiries.alphatv36@yahoo.com. Thank you again for watching, and we look forward to seeing you the next edition. Until then, from all of us at The Fiction Factor, good night.